On September 20th, 2023, police in Kabul, Afghanistan received a tip from a concerned neighbor about something deeply disturbing happening in a house on Sheikh Ali Lane. Children who had been playing at the property came home with stories of a mentally ill woman living in extreme filth. When authorities investigated, they discovered something far more horrifying. Behind a locked door in that house was a small, dark room. Inside that room was a 50-year-old woman named Nikbakht. She had been locked in that space for 25 years. Most people assumed this was a tragic case of a family caring for a mentally ill relative. However, that couldn't have been further from the truth. The room where Nikbakht was found was barely 2 meters by 2 meters. It had no windows. No light had penetrated that space in over 2 decades. The walls were stained black with years of accumulated filth. There was a single bucket overflowing with human waste. The air was so thick with the stench that even hardened police officers struggled to breathe, and there, huddled in the corner, was Nikbakht. Her hair was matted, her skin was deathly pale. She couldn't stand, she could barely speak. When officers tried to communicate with her, she kept repeating one phrase over and over. "Don't blame my brother. Don't blame my brother." Not only was this extremely disturbing, it also left investigators with many unanswered questions. How does a woman vanish inside her own family's home for 25 years without anyone intervening? Why did neighbors wait so long to report the sounds they had been hearing for years? And perhaps most chilling of all, what crime could possibly justify locking your own sister away for a quarter of a century? The disappearance was particularly mysterious because there was no missing person report. No one had been looking for Nikbakht. Her family had told neighbors she had moved to Parwan province to live with relatives. The only logical explanation for all of these questions is that this was a deliberate, calculated act of imprisonment designed to erase a woman from existence because she had committed the unforgivable crime of leaving her husband. To understand how this nightmare began, we need to go back to 1998. Nikbakht was 25 years old and married, but like so many women in Afghanistan during that era, her marriage was violent. Her husband abused her physically and emotionally. Eventually, Nikbakht made a decision that would seal her fate. She left him. In Afghan culture, especially during the late 1990s under the first Taliban regime, divorce brought immense shame to a family. But there was more. Nikbakht couldn't have children. In a society where a woman's worth was often measured by her ability to bear sons, this made her worthless in the eyes of her family. Her brother, Ghulam Saki, saw her as a burden, an embarrassment, a stain on the family honor. And so he made a decision. He locked her in a small storage room in their family compound. At first, he told neighbors she had gone away, that she was visiting relatives in Parwan province. But weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And Nikbakht remained locked away. This phenomenon was widespread enough that police spokesman Khalid Zadran would later describe the case as one of the worst examples of family cruelty he had ever witnessed. Many in the neighborhood believed the family's story about Nikbakht moving away. Another theory that some held was that she was genuinely mentally ill and the family was protecting her. However, none of these theories hold up to scrutiny because when doctors examined Nikbakht after her rescue, they found no evidence of any neurological disorder. The truth was far simpler and far more horrifying. She was being punished for leaving her husband. They kept her locked in that room for 9,125 days. A decision they'd come to regret as international attention would eventually shine a spotlight on their cruelty, fueled by a series of increasingly disturbing revelations about the conditions of her captivity. For those who don't know, the room where Nikbakht was imprisoned was little more than a concrete box. Every day, Ghulam Saki would push a small plate of food through a hole in the wall. Sometimes bread, sometimes rice, sometimes nothing at all. She had no bed, no blanket, no toilet, just a bucket in the corner. She lived in complete darkness. Years passed. The woman who was once 25 slowly withered away in that room. Her body weakened. Her muscles atrophied from lack of movement. Her teeth fell out from malnutrition. Her skin became paper thin. Her bones brittle. And perhaps most tragically, she lost hope. But here's the thing. Ghulam Saki's wife later told investigators that she had begged her husband to release Nikbakht. How can that be possible? The wife knew this woman was suffering. She heard her cries, she smelled the stench, yet she did nothing for 25 years. Not to mention the family's 3 sons who grew up in that house knowing their aunt was locked in a room just meters away. They heard her, they knew, but they remained silent. All of this points to a far more disturbing theory. This wasn't just one man's cruelty. This was a family's collective decision to erase a woman because she had brought them shame. Ultimately, despite many attempts by neighbors to convince themselves that nothing was wrong, Nikbakht's imprisonment remained a dark secret for nearly 25 years. That is until children playing at the house discovered her and told their parents. One neighbor, Kadim Hussein Husseini, said his sons came home and told him about a mentally ill woman living in filth. He went to investigate and realized immediately that this woman wasn't mentally ill. She was a prisoner. He reported it to authorities the same day. When police arrived at the house, Ghulam Saki tried to turn them away. He insisted everything was fine, but the officers had a warrant. They weren't leaving without searching the property. When they broke open the locked room, even these hardened officers were shocked into silence. Officer Hamad Fahim, who was part of the rescue team, later said, "I've seen many terrible things in my career, but this was evil in its purest form." Nikbakht was immediately taken to a hospital in Kabul. The doctors found she was suffering from severe malnutrition, anemia, and muscle atrophy. Her body was shutting down. Acting Interior Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani personally intervened, ordering that she receive the best medical care available. For the first time in 25 years, Nikbakht saw sunlight. For the first time in 25 years, she slept in a bed. For the first time in 25 years, she was free. In the end, the truth behind Nikbakht's imprisonment was a lot more mundane than government conspiracy or secret experiments. She was locked away because she had divorced her husband and couldn't have children. That's it. No grand mystery, just a family's cruelty. This left many in Afghanistan and around the world expressing not disappointment but rage at how such a thing could happen. Police arrested 4 people in connection with her captivity. Ghulam Saki, her brother and primary captor, and his 3 sons, who had lived in that house knowing their aunt was imprisoned just meters away. All 4 were charged with unlawful imprisonment, abuse, and neglect. Nikbakht spent 1 month in the hospital recovering. Slowly, she began to gain weight. Her wounds began to heal. Doctors were cautiously optimistic. After being discharged, she was moved to a safe house where she could live under protection and receive regular medical checkups. For 5 months, Nikbakht experienced something she hadn't felt in a quarter-century: freedom. She walked outside. She felt rain on her face. She heard birds singing. But her body had been broken beyond repair. On February 24th, 2024, just 5 months after her rescue, Nikbakht's health suddenly deteriorated. She died at 6:30 a.m. on February 26th. She was only 50 years old. The official cause of death was complications from prolonged malnutrition and organ failure. But the truth is simpler. 25 years in darkness had destroyed her. While the truth isn't as thrilling as some might have hoped, it brought closure to those who spent years wondering what happened to the woman who simply vanished. Acting Interior Minister Haqqani personally attended her funeral. She was buried on Wazir Mohammad Akbar Khan Hill in Kabul. The woman who spent 25 years locked in a room barely 2 meters wide was finally laid to rest under the open sky. Whatever the truth may be, it doesn't change the fact that Nikbakht spent 9,125 days in captivity. She spent 25 years without sunlight, without freedom, without hope. And then when she was finally rescued, she only lived 5 more months. 5 months of freedom after a quarter century of hell. We can only hope that in those final months, she found some measure of peace. Unfortunately, we'll likely never learn the full extent of what Nikbakht endured in that dark room unless, of course, someone with insight or knowledge decides to come forward. Though after 25 years of silence from a family that knew, that seems increasingly unlikely.